Weathering your miniatures fast and easy and looking good, it can be done. Hey friends, you're watching Squidmar Miniatures and I'm Emil. So what are we doing today? Well, in my time in the hobby, I always try to find new ways to develop and to try out new things, and quite frankly just to find inspiration and excitement. Lately I've been trying to find ways to improve my skills in weathering and trying out new techniques such as oils and enamel washes and just weathering in general. And I've said this before, try to paint bravely, and that's what we're going to try to do today. Because I've been just getting started with painting with oils and I've been having a lot of fun with all of these different techniques and effects, and I hope that this video might open new doors for you as well. I'm not yet an expert at this subject, but I'm learning every day, and I hope that this video can push you to try out new things and to try out these things that I've been practicing. And when you've done it, hopefully you can paint some awesome miniatures in quite a short amount of time. Today I really want to plug 3 painters that have inspired me to try this thing out, and the first one is Roman Lappat, who just does amazing stuff on his blog and his Instagram. The second one is Saskatoon, I think that's how it's pronounced. It's a YouTube channel from a guy who paints a lot of this grimdark stuff. And then we have Marco Frisoni, who also paints a lot with oils. These are the 3 guys that push me to practice this more. So after you watch this video, I can recommend you to go check out these guys' channels or blogs. For today's video, I have a sponsor called Titan Forge. These guys have been incredibly supportive of this channel, helping me with stuff from an early stage, and now they're helping the community at large by sponsoring different videos and helping creators to be able to do their channels. Titan Forge is a brand that has been doing miniatures for a long time. They recently started dabbling in selling 3D printing files, and what they've done is they've opened up a Patreon, which is sort of like a monthly subscription, and every month they release a kit of new miniatures. This month, for example, they have dwarves as a theme, and every month you as a Patreon supporter get to vote for the next month's miniatures. And these guys just make awesome designs that fits pretty much any game you can play, if it's Dungeons and Dragons, if it's Kings of War, if it's Frostgrave, or maybe you just want to play with alternative models for Warhammer. So I really recommend you to go check these guys out. Support them on Patreon, it's like $10 right now. And if you don't have a 3D printer, they also have some of these models available as physical models, for example the one that I will be painting today, so you can select whichever you like. I put the links in the description if you want to check it out. So I've been pondering for a while what I was supposed to do with this miniature that I was given, and I come to the conclusion that this miniature could be an awesome way of kind of showcasing some of the techniques that I've been learning about weathering miniatures and painting a bit faster using some techniques that's not like the classical just painting with volumes with a brush. And if you watched the intro already, you kind of know to what level you can get the miniature, and it's actually a lot faster than you think it is. So let's start with just looking at this miniature. And when you paint with these kind of techniques, you have to plan out your miniatures ahead of time. Because if you don't, you might miss some steps where you want the paints to be, and it might be a little bit harder to go back and change that afterwards. So take a look at the miniature and plan it before you start out. It's going to be more important than when you paint normally, where you can just experiment and change things as time goes. And really, if you want this to be a fast process and you want to save time while painting, it's not in the planning step you save time. The idea and the theme of it is that it's been left behind in the battlefield and just standing in the woods or in like a muddy field for at least a couple of decades, maybe even 100 years. To create this effect of this white armor being worn, we need to start with our darker base paint. And what I'm doing now is I'm painting everything with a dark brown. I'm using Rhinox hide from Citadel Color and covering all of the metal parts and all of the parts that are going to be worn with this brown. And this brown is one of my favorite paints. I use it in almost every video, and what it does in this one is that it creates a strong contrast between the white armor and sort of the base paint that would be beneath this armor color. That's the white one that we're gonna add later. And here comes the first step to something that I can just describe as something almost magical. I'm using this technique that I learned from Saskatoon and Marco Frisoni, and it's really pure magic. I'm using this worn effects or chipping medium from AK Interactive. And what I do is I add a couple of thick layers to these brown parts that we're going to ship later. I'm using the airbrush, and I don't want this medium to dry directly. I want to have it thick enough to last a few seconds before it starts drying up. I can then speed up the process of the drying by just spraying some air through the airbrush. Be careful not using a hot spray like a hair fan or something like that. And when we've added this and it dried up, we have about 30-40 minutes time span where we can work with the shipping medium to create the shipped effects. And for this specific miniature, I'm adding a bone white color. This is Wraith Bone White from Citadel Color, but you can use whatever paint you want to have. And this white is not going to be the final color, the final look of the miniature, and you're going to see the steps we add later to give it more volume. But for this step, you need to cover all of the parts that we're going to ship with a thick layer. You don't want it to be a super thin one where you can almost see through it. You want to cover all of the parts of the miniature using this bone color or whatever brighter color you're using. And once this white color has dried, this is where the magic happens. I'm bringing out a couple of different brushes that have different stiffness. I'm adding some water to the brushes and then just starts brushing, stippling, stabbing, and going nuts on these white parts of the miniature. And you can see, depending on how much water I add, how much force I use, and obviously how long I waited for it to dry, I remove different parts of the miniature, different large areas of the miniature, and to me this is just magical, and it really separates the layers, giving them this high contrast between the fully painted white bone color and the dark brown that we had underneath. And just be brave experimenting with this. Use different brushes you have at home with different stiffness, and you can try different tools as well. You can use a toothbrush to make some scratches on the surface. Maybe you find something else that you can try at home. If you have any cool ideas, you can leave them in the comment section below and let us know some awesome effects you can make with this. And this technique is really simple and it's super fast, and I have a lot of fun doing this. I'm definitely going to paint up some larger vehicles for 40k later and just go nuts with this. And when I reach the point that I'm happy with, I will add the rest of the base paints. The reason why I'm adding all of the paints now is because I want the whole miniature to be affected by all of the weathering steps that we're adding later. And because this ancient forge have been left behind in battle, all of the things on the miniature would have these weatherings, whether it's sitting in the woods for a couple of decades or whatever it is. Like all of the metal parts, all of the different tubings, everything would be weathered. So if I just paint everything now, then we can add more general weathering to the miniatures later. So what's up next? Well, it's time to add all of the grime, the grease, and all of the nasty mucus things that comes with weathering and leaving stuffs out in the nature for hundreds of years. I have 3 different bottles from AK Interactive that all pretty much do the same thing, but with a slightly different tone. But these are not the only things that work. I also have a set of oil paints that can be thinned down in the airbrush with some mineral spirits and will work pretty much exactly the same way as these grime effects do, but this is pre-thinned and it's just the easy way to do it, and quite frankly they look amazing. So my recommendation is maybe to start with one of these. So if you want your miniature to have more of a green oily tone, kind of what Roman Lapat had on this one, you can do the same step but then using like a dark green oil and thinning it down rather than using this streaky grime. But for this one, we're using obviously this AK Interactive Streaking Grime, and I spray this through the airbrush, covering pretty much the whole miniature with this. And everything, just the red parts, the armor parts, and yeah, a semi-thick layer over the whole one, but in the deepest crevices, like in the cracks and in the corners where a cleaner probably wouldn't reach, or where the creatures moving around in this area wouldn't walk, we will add a little bit more because that's where the most grease and grime would collect over the years. And now this is where one of the most fun steps comes in. At least for me, this is what I enjoyed most. Take out a couple of cotton buds and paper tissues and your bottle of white spirits. Take a soaked Q-tip or the cotton bud and start brushing it around where you want the miniature to be less grimy. This goes once again super fast and it really gives a nice weathered effect to the bone color or the white color that we had to the miniature armor parts before. I do the same thing to all of the metal parts as well, and it just gives a super nice transition between the darkest, grimiest, oilier parts in the inner areas of the miniature. So just try to experiment with this and see what suits your style. With this one we're going quite grimy and not removing too much of it, but as you can see it just really creates a nice textured surface without a lot of effort. And compared to time spent, this is probably the effect that gives the most for the least effort. If you have a lot of excess paint as well, you can just add some more of the white spirits to the miniature and then use paper tissue to stipple away some of that spirits, and you will have even more of textures on your meat. So we reached a really high level at what I think this was like 40 minutes, 30 minutes work, but we're not finished yet. We're going to keep increasing the level of this paint job by just doing a few extra things. I've got a couple of hot tips for things you can do using oil paints, adding weathering to your miniatures. Adding more rust tones, oxidization or weathering is really a joy using oil paints. I'm creating some oxide effects using this turquoise oil. Since oil has a longer drying time, you can start by adding a layer of paint on top of it and then using a dry brush to smudge it out a little bit. This is a great first step to kind of create an initial color value where you want your effects to be. If you're happy with the placement of this, you can just add another layer of the oils, but don't smear it out this time. Just add it to a smaller surface than what you had and you will have a strong effect in the center and a nice smooth transition going out from that. And by this, yeah, you have a super smooth oxidization really simply. Just remember, when using brushes and oil, I recommend you not to use like the most expensive brush you have. Maybe find some cheaper ones. I've linked a couple of them on my website, squidmar.com, and you can just follow those links and purchase some cheaper brushes to not break your super fancy ones. And when cleaning them, use the white spirits again. Put it in a small cup or something and just clean the brushes using the white spirits instead of using water. I can also use the white spirits in combination with the oil paints to create more of a wash. Since the mineral spirits have a super low surface tension, the oil paints will just flow directly into all of the rivets and cracks. Around these metal pegs, it will be perfect to add some of that oxidization, and on some of them I will just add more of the oil effects. I'm also doing this to separate the panels using some black oil paint, mineral spirits, testing out different consistencies, and I have a perfect oil wash in just a few seconds. And when comparing these to the pre-made Games Workshop Army Painter or whatever washes, this one has a lot lower surface tension, so it really just flows out magically into all of the cracks and crevices. But we're not done yet. We have some more fun things we can do. I told you earlier about some of these AK Interactive enamel washes, and they are another easy way of adding more of these cool effects. I'm using the AK rust streaks and the red streaking grime to add more tonal variation to the brown clippings. Maybe also to create more of a rust tone and add a bit more of the red side than the original really dark brown that we had. I have ordered an orange oil paint as well, but unfortunately I didn't get it in time for recording the video. If I would have, I probably would have added a little bit more orange to the parts that I wanted to be rusty, but this will do for now. And one last thing that I use for pretty much every miniature project that I have is adding dry pigments. And this technique might not fit perfectly for this type of miniature, but once again, if you go look at some of the works that Roman Lapat did, for example, where he has this car in the mini diorama that's grown over, adding some green pigments or maybe some red pigments that's gonna be more like the dirt that it's in, is a super fast way of adding realism and dust effects to your miniatures. Using the principle of less is more is really true when it comes to this. Just adding a little bit of this effect just goes a super long way. Saskatoon is brilliant with using this, just adding it as contrasting colors. So if you had like a green armor, it would be really cool to have some redder pigments in the bottom. It's perfect for adding dust to things, to maybe miniature feet or the wheels of tanks or vehicles. You can add some of these pigments and it really looks like they've been in the environment that you've based your miniature in. And these are the colors that I have lying around at home, and I use them on pretty much every project, using different ones if it's for a Martian environment, if it's for a desert, a forest, or a midland. So buying a couple of these is a great way of enhancing your miniatures quickly and easy. So guys, this is what I've learned so far, and I hope it's enough to get you at least a little bit excited and interested in trying out weathering effects and going nuts with oil paints and enamel washes. I'm really enjoying the process, and I hope you had a little bit of fun hanging around with me today. If you did, leave a like, maybe a comment, and subscribe if you want to see more hobby videos. I release videos every week. If you're interested in picking up any of the stuff that I used in the video, whether it's the airbrush, any of the AK interactive stuff, or the pigments or whatever, I have listed all of them in the video description. I also linked to Element Games, which have been kind enough again to set up a subpage on their web shop so you can pick up anything that you found interesting in the video. If you don't want to shop from them, you can just follow the Amazon links in the description. Just click on any of them to your country, and anything you shop after you visited that link, Amazon gives a little bit of a kickback to this channel for sending some of my viewers to them to pick up stuff. So you can pick up, I think all of it almost is available on Amazon as well. And if you're interested in this week's sponsor, Titan Forge, I also put the link to their Patreon and website in the description, so don't forget to check that out. If you're still around, you probably enjoy Squidmar a bit, and if you do and you want to support me, you can join my Patreon, donating a few dollars every month. Join us on Discord as well with the Patreon exclusive Discord chat, which has become pretty much my favorite place on the internet right now. It's just such a positive group, chatting every day about miniature, painting, life in general. It's just a super great place to be if you want some more positivity in your life. And a massive shout out to my top Patreon supporters, of course: Evan Weston, Russ Prentice, Patrick D, Albin Ostrom. And with that said, guys, have a great day. Bye.